Katherine Knight was born and raised in an unconventional and dysfunctional family environment. Her mother, Barbara Ruffin, had been married to John Ruffin, nicknamed Jack, and lived with him in the small town of Aberdeen in New South Wales Hunter Valley. They had 4 sons before Barbara began a relationship with Kenneth Charles Knight, nicknamed Ken, a friend and co-worker of her then husband. The local backlash forced Barbara and Ken to move to Marie. None of her sons went with her. The 2 eldest boys continued to reside with their father, and the 2 younger sons were sent to be raised by an aunt in Sydney. Barbara had 4 additional children with Ken, including twin girls born in 1955 in Tenterfield. Knight was one of these twin daughters. In 1959, when Knight was 4 years old, John Ruffin died and his 2 older sons moved in with Barbara and Ken. Ken was a violent alcoholic who would essay Barbara up to 10 times per day. Barbara, in turn, often shared intimate details of her intimate life with her daughters and expressed her hatred for intimacy and men. Later, when Knight complained to her mother about an intimate partner wanting her to engage in an act she did not wish to perform, Barbara advised her to endure it and stop complaining. Knight alleged she was frequently essayed by several members of her family, excluding her father, until she was aged 11. Although there are doubts regarding the specifics, psychiatrists accepted her allegations, and these events have been largely confirmed by other family members. When she attended Muswellbrook High School, Knight became a loner and is remembered by classmates as a bully who stood over smaller pupils. She assaulted at least 1 boy at school with a weapon and was once injured by a teacher, who was subsequently found to have acted in self-defense. By contrast, when not in a rage, Knight was a model student and often earned awards for her good behavior. Knight left school at the age of 15, having not learned to read or write. She initially worked as a cutter in a clothing factory before moving on to what she described as her dream job at a local abattoir, where she began cutting up offal. She quickly advanced to boning and received her own set of butcher's knives. Knight kept these knives hung over her bed at home, stating that they would always be handy if needed, a practice she maintained until her incarceration. Residents of Aberdeen later recalled Knight for her tendency to physically threaten anyone who angered her. Knight first met co-worker David Stanford Kellett in 1973. Kellett engaged in heavy drinking, which stemmed from 2 traumatic incidents from his previous railway job in Coffs Harbour. First, when his best friend was killed in front of him in a shunting accident. Later, when he rescued injured occupants of a school bus in Kempsey, which had been struck by a train, killing 6 children. He eventually lost the job due to deteriorating behavior and performance, but he soon got work at the nearby Aberdeen abattoir and became close friends with Knight's brother. Often, if Kellett got into a fight, Knight would step in and back him up with her fists. Knight married Kellett in 1974 at her request. They arrived at the service on her motorcycle, with Kellett appearing quite intoxicated on the pillion. Upon their arrival, Knight's mother, Barbara, offered Kellett some stern advice about his new wife. She warned him to be cautious, stating that if he upset Knight or cheated on her, he would be in serious trouble. She indicated that Knight had some unpredictable tendencies. On their wedding night, Knight attempted to strangle Kellett, later explaining that it was due to him falling asleep after they had intercourse only 3 times. The marriage proved particularly violent, and on one occasion, a heavily pregnant Knight burned all of Kellett's clothing and shoes before assaulting him with a frying pan, simply because he had arrived home late from a darts competition after reaching the finals, in fear for his life. Kellett fled before collapsing in a neighbor's house and was treated for a severely fractured skull. Police wanted to charge Knight, but she changed her behavior to ingratiating Kellett and talked him into dropping the charges. In May 1976, shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa Ann, Kellett left Knight for another woman and moved to Queensland, apparently unable to cope with the abuse. The next day, Knight was seen pushing her newborn baby in a pram down the main street, violently throwing the pram from side to side. She was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where she was diagnosed with postnatal depression and spent several weeks recovering. After being released, Knight placed two-man-hold Melissa on a railway line. She then stole an axe, went into town, and threatened to harm several people. A homeless man known as Old Ted, who was foraging near the railway line, found and rescued Melissa, by all accounts, only minutes before the train passed. Knight was arrested and again taken to St. Elmo's Hospital, but apparently she recovered and signed herself out the following day. A few days later, Knight slashed the face of a woman with one of her knives and demanded she drive her to Queensland to find Kellett. The woman escaped after they stopped at a service station. However, by the time police arrived, Knight had taken a young boy hostage and was threatening him with the knife. She was disarmed when police attacked her with brooms and was admitted to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. Knight told the nurses she had intended to kill the mechanic at the service station because he had repaired Kellett's car, which had allowed him to leave, and then kill both her husband and his mother when she arrived in Queensland. When police informed Kellett of the incident, he left his girlfriend and moved to Aberdeen with his mother to support Knight. Knight was released on the 9th of August, 1976, into the care of her mother-in-law and, along with Kellett, moved to Ipswich, a city west of Brisbane, where she obtained a job at the Deanmore Meat Works. On the 6th of March, 1980, they had another daughter, Natasha Mary. In 1984, Knight left Kellett and moved, first to her parents' house in Aberdeen, then to a rented house in nearby Muswell. Although she returned to work at the abattoir, she injured her back the following year and went on a disability pension, since she no longer needed to rent accommodation close to her work. The government provided her with a housing commission residence in Aberdeen. John Thomas Price was the father of 3 children when he began his affair with Knight. Reputedly a terrific guy, liked by everyone who knew him. His own marriage had ended in 1988, while his 2-year-old daughter had remained with his former wife. The 2 older children lived with him. Price was aware of Knight's violent reputation when she moved into his house in 1995. However, his children liked her. He was making a lot of money working in the local mines, and, apart from violent arguments, at first life was alright. In 1998, Knight and Price fought over his refusal to marry her. In retaliation, she videotaped items he had allegedly stolen from work and sent the tape to his boss. Although the items were out-of-date medical kits that he had scavenged from the company rubbish tip, Price was fired from the job he had held for 17 years. That same day, he kicked her out and she returned to her own home, while news of what she had done spread throughout the town. A few months later, Price restarted the relationship, although he now refused to allow her to move in with him. The fighting became even more frequent, and most of his friends would no longer have anything to do with him, while they remained together. In February 2000, a series of assaults on Price culminated with Knight stabbing him. Finally fed up, he kicked her out of his house. On the 28th of February, he stopped at the Scone Magistrates Court on his way to work and took out a restraining order in an attempt to keep her away from both himself and his children. That afternoon, Price told his co-workers that if he did not come to work the next day, it would be because Knight had murdered him. Despite their pleas that Price should not return home, he stated that he was afraid Knight would kill his children if he did not. Price arrived home to find that Knight, although not there herself, had sent the children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the evening with his neighbors before returning home and going to bed at 11 p.m. Earlier that day, Knight had bought new black lingerie and had videotaped all her children while making comments which have since been interpreted as a crude, makeshift will. She later arrived at Price's house while he was sleeping and sat watching television for a few minutes before having a shower. She then woke Price and they had intercourse, after which he fell asleep. At 6 a.m. the next day, a neighbor became concerned that Price's car was still in the driveway, and when he did not arrive at work, his employer sent a worker to see what was wrong. Both the neighbor and the worker tried knocking on Price's bedroom window to wake him, but they alerted police after noticing blood on the front door. Breaking down the back door, police found Price's body, with Knight comatose from taking a large number of pills. She had stabbed Price with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping. The blood evidence appeared to show that he awoke and tried to turn the light on before attempting to escape while Knight chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but he either stumbled back inside or was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died after bleeding out. Later, Knight went into Aberdeen and withdrew $1,000 from Price's account at an ATM. Price's autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed at least 37 times, in both the front and back of his torso, with many of the wounds extending into vital organs. Several hours after Price had died, Knight skinned him and hung the skin from a door to the lounge room. She then decapitated Price and cooked parts of his body, serving it up with vegetables and gravy in 2 sittings at the dinner table, along with a note beside each plate, each bearing the name of one of Price's 2 children, suggesting preparations for serving him to his children as a meal. A 3rd meal was thrown on the back lawn for unknown reasons, and it is speculated that Knight had attempted to eat it, but could not. This has been put forward in support of her claim that she has no memory of the crime. Price's head was found in a pot with vegetables. The pot was still warm, estimated to be at between 104 and 122 degrees Fahrenheit, indicating that the cooking had taken place in the early morning. Knight had left a handwritten note on top of a photograph of Price. Covered in blood, it read,
"Time got you back, Jonathan, for essaying my daughter. You'd have beck your daughter for Ross, for little John, your son. Now play with little John's John Price."
The accusations in the note were found to be groundless. Knight's initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected, and she was charged on the 2nd of March 2001 with murdering Price, to which she entered a plea of not guilty. Her trial was initially fixed for the 23rd of July 2001, but it was adjourned due to her counsel's illness, and it was refixed for the 15th of October 2001. When the trial commenced, Justice Barry O'Keefe offered the 60 jury prospects the option of being excused due to the graphic nature of the photographic evidence, which 5 accepted. When the witness list was read out to the prospects, several more also dropped out, after which the jury was impaneled. Knight's attorneys then spoke to the judge, who adjourned to the following day. The next morning, Knight changed her plea to guilty, and the jury was dismissed. It was then made public that Justice O'Keefe had been advised of the plea change the day before. He had adjourned the trial and then ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight to determine if Knight understood the consequences of a guilty plea and was fit to make such a plea. Knight's legal team had planned to defend Knight by claiming amnesia and dissociation, a claim supported by most psychiatrists, although they did consider her sane. 2 psychiatrists concluded that Knight suffered from borderline personality disorder. No explanation has ever been provided for the guilty plea, and even after pleading guilty, Knight continued to deny responsibility for her actions. During the sentencing hearing, her lawyers asked for her to be excused from hearing certain details, but the request was denied. When Timothy Lyons testified about the skinning and decapitation, Knight became hysterical and had to be sedated. During the trial on the 8th of November 2001, Justice O'Keefe emphasized the severity of the crime and Knight's lack of remorse, which warranted a harsh penalty. He sentenced her to life imprisonment without setting a non-parole period and mandated that her papers be labeled "definitely never to be released," marking a historic first for a woman in Australian legal history. In June 2006, Knight appealed her life sentence, arguing that the penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole was too severe for the crime. Justices Peter McClellan, Michael Adams, and Megan Latham dismissed the appeal in September at the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal. Justice McClellan stated that the crime was appalling and nearly unimaginable in a civilized society. Katherine Knight remains in Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, housed in protective custody because even among lifers, she is regarded as an extreme risk. Now nearing 70, she has never expressed remorse, continues to insist she remembers nothing of the night she butchered John Price, and has spent years filing futile appeals and applications for release. In 2022, she claimed to be a changed woman, but prison authorities and the families of her victims remain unmoved. Her case file still carries the unique marking, "Never to be released," the only woman in Australia to receive that permanent designation. The chilling precision with which she turned a domestic argument into a scene from a slaughterhouse have made Katherine Knight the benchmark for worst female killer in Australian criminal history. Forensic psychologists still debate whether the act was the ultimate explosion of borderline pathology or a calculated performance of revenge. What is undisputed is that on the morning of the 1st of March 2000, police officers with years on the job wept and required counseling after walking into Price's house. The photographs shown to the jury were so disturbing that several potential jurors were excused simply for seeing them. Even seasoned crime reporters struggled to file their stories that day. The case of John Price shocked a nation already hardened to violent crime. It forced Australians to confront the reality that the worst atrocities are not always committed by strangers in dark alleys, but sometimes by the person lying next to you in bed. Knight's story is a grim reminder of how childhood trauma, untreated mental illness, and unchecked rage can converge into something beyond human comprehension, an act so grotesque that it still defies adequate description more than 2 decades later.